They locked me inside a room, once the kind with no windows and a door so heavy it swallowed all hope. I was 23, breath shallow, heart hammering against my ribs like a desperate prisoner fighting to survive. They said I'd never leave alive. But what they didn't know was the secret. I carried a fire inside me, fierce enough to shatter every chain. If you've ever felt trapped by the ones who promised to love you, comment 1, so I know I'm not alone. Like this video if you've ever hidden your true self just to stay safe. Subscribe if you believe every broken soul deserves to rise. My name is Gemma. My story isn't just about survival, it's about breaking free from a love that suffocated, a cage disguised as family. For years, I lived in a house where silence screamed louder than words, where every glance was a test, every word a trap. I remember waking up to a room that smelled of stale fear and forgotten dreams. The faded curtains barely let in light, casting shadows that felt like cold hands reaching for me. My hands would tremble as I pulled my worn sweater tighter, hiding bruises no one ever asked about, hazel eyes restless, searching for an escape I couldn't yet see. Every day was a performance, a forced smile, measured words, hiding the storm inside. Their eyes were knives, cutting deeper than any wound. The air was thick with unspoken rules and cold expectations. I became a ghost in my own life, folding myself smaller, hoping to disappear. But beneath that silence I held a secret, a flicker of hope, a whisper that one day I'd be free. One night, after a fight that cracked the walls of control, their words cut through me. "You'll never make it without us. You're weak. You're nothing." Instead of breaking, those words ignited a fire inside me, fierce, raw, unrelenting. I packed a small bag with trembling hands, a threadbare photo, a sweater, and a fierce determination to survive. Stepping into the cold night air, the bite of winter stung my skin, but I breathed it in like freedom. Every step away was a victory, a war waged inside me between fear and hope. Then my phone buzzed. A message appeared. "You think you're free? You belong to us. Don't forget it." Their grip wasn't broken, just stretched. If love can imprison you, what does freedom really mean? Would you risk everything to find it? So tell me, what would you do if those who promised to love you became your captors? If you're ready to hear how I clawed my way back to life, stay with me. This is only the beginning. The sound of the lock rattling was like a hammer pounding against my chest. I pressed my back against the cold, cracked wall of my tiny apartment, trying to steady my breathing. The footsteps outside grew louder, slow and deliberate, dripping with menace. 3 figures stepped out of the shadows' faces I'd hoped never to see again. "You really thought you could disappear?" hissed a voice low and venomous. "Gemma, you belong to us." My heart slammed against my ribs as the door burst open. The stench of cheap alcohol and sweat filled the air. The tallest one stepped forward, eyes cold and cruel, lips curling into a malicious smile. "We own your past, your future, everything you are," he sneered. My hands clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to run, to scream, to fight, but years of fear and silence shackled me in place. They laughed not with joy, but with the satisfaction of power. "You're nothing but a coward," spat the one with the cruel smile. "Running away doesn't change who you are." Their words cut deeper than any wound. Around me, neighbors peered through cracked doors and windows, whispers spreading like wildfire. I was exposed vulnerable, naked in front of strangers. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I swallowed the humiliation, wrapping myself in a cold cloak of numbness. That night, curled on the unforgiving floor, I felt broken, yet somewhere inside, a fierce spark glowed. Days later, a plain brown envelope slipped beneath my door. Inside, a photograph my mother's old locket, tarnished and cracked. Alongside it, a note scrawled in jagged letters. We see everything, run again, and this is just the beginning. It was no longer a game. They were dismantling every piece of my life, every last thread of hope. I spent sleepless nights imagining their faces, the sneers, the laughter, the merciless grip tightening around my throat. One evening, as I left work under a bruised purple sky, I sensed eyes burning into my back. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. 2 of them stood in the alley's shadows, faces hard, merciless. I fought the rising panic with clenched fists and a roaring storm inside. "How far would you go?" I whispered to the night, "when the past won't let you go?" But the nightmare didn't end there. The next day, my phone buzzed with a video. It showed my closest friend someone I thought was safe. The camera shook as their face twisted into a sneer. "You thought you could trust anyone? We own everything you love. One wrong move, and they're gone." My breath caught. Fear clashed with fury. Their cruelty knew no bounds. Then, the unthinkable happened. Returning home late one night, the door to my apartment was ajar, broken in. Inside, my few precious belongings lay scattered and ruined. The locket was gone. A cold voice whispered behind me, "You're ours, Gemma, forever." I spun around, heart racing, to face the darkness closing in. When those who promised to love you become your captors, how far would you go to reclaim your freedom? If you've ever faced enemies in your own home, comment 1 to stand with me. Like and share if you believe no one should fight alone. The cage is tightening. The shadows are closing in. And the real fight is just beginning. The cold wasn't just outside anymore. It had crept deep inside my bones, gnawing at me with icy fingers. Each breath was a ragged struggle, sharp and shallow, like I was drowning in a sea of despair. My chest tightened unbearably as if the weight of every broken promise, every shattered dream was pressing down, threatening to crush what little remained of me. I collapsed onto the worn floorboards of my tiny apartment, the rough wood biting into my thin socks. Tears burst uncontrollably down my face-hot. Relentless rivers carving silent paths over skin that felt numb. The walls closed in, suffocating, confining me to a cage made not of iron but of loneliness and pain. I was utterly, hopelessly alone. The friends I had trusted, those who once whispered promises of safety, vanished like ghosts. Their voices faded into silence, their messages left unread, their calls unanswered. But the sharpest, deepest wound came from the one person I believed would never betray me, the one I called my anchor in the storm. Their betrayal wasn't sudden. It was slow, venomous, dripping like poison with every cruel word. "You're a burden. You'll never be enough. Don't expect me to save you." Those words sliced through my soul with a precision sharper than any blade. The person who was supposed to be my shield became the sharpest weapon aimed directly at my heart. Money ran dry like a forgotten riverbed. Bills piled up like accusing spectres in the dim light. My apartment, once a refuge, became a tomb of broken dreams. I skipped meals, let hunger gnaw at my insides. As my body weakened but my spirit refused to surrender, sleep fled me, replaced by nightmares, where shadows whispered threats, and the past clawed its way back into my waking mind. I lay awake for hours, heart pounding in my chest, every sound amplified into a roar. My body shook with a cocktail of rage, despair, and exhaustion. I screamed into the darkness, not a sound, just a wild, silent scream that tore through the void. My tears were not just sadness, they were a furious storm of pain, a primal howl from a soul pushed to its breaking point. Yet, even in that crushing abyss, a fragile spark flickered, a stubborn ember of hope, dim but unyielding. I clutched a crumpled photograph, the smiling faces from a distant past, a time before the darkness claimed me. Whispering to the empty room, I vowed, "This isn't the end. It can't be." Outside, The night was alive with cold whispers and distant sirens. I lay awake, haunted by memories and the looming threat of what was to come. The shadows were no longer figments of my imagination. They were real, closing in like wolves ready to pounce. Then, my phone buzzed. A single message illuminated the screen. "You belong to us. There's no escape." The cage was tightening. The noose was pulling taut. When the people you love become your enemies, when the world turns its back, and every step forward feels like sinking deeper, how do you find the strength to rise? How do you fight when the darkness consumes everything you hold dear? If you've ever been shattered but refused to stay broken, comment 1 and stand with me. Like, share, and remember even the smallest spark can ignite the fiercest fire. Because sometimes the deepest wounds forge the strongest warriors. The cold that once gripped me like a vice had begun to loosen, replaced by a fire simmering beneath my skin, quiet, relentless, and fierce. I was no longer the frightened girl who hid in shadows. I was becoming something newer, warrior forged in pain and fueled by determination. Every morning I woke with the weight of doubt pressing down, but I faced it head on. Some days my body screamed to stop. Exhaustion threatened to swallow me whole. But the memory of locked doors, whispered threats, and shattered silence refused to let me surrender. I found solace in small victories. I devoured books on resilience, strategy, and strength. Every bruise that bloomed on my skin was a badge of honor. Every faltered step was a lesson learned. The journey was grueling, a maze of setbacks, betrayals, and moments when giving up seemed easier. One night, after a particularly brutal training session, I collapsed, tears blurring my vision. I felt broken. But in the depths of despair, a voice rose within me, a whisper, a roar. "You are the phoenix. You will rise." Clinging to that, I pushed beyond pain and fear. Building my network was another battle. Trust was fragile. I was wary of betrayal. One friend disappeared just when I needed her most, echoing the wounds of my past. Yet, I learned to stand alone when necessary, to fight with every fiber of my being. Then the taunts came mocking, venomous, but no longer terrifying. "You think you're strong? You're just delaying the inevitable." But I was ready. One evening, I spotted a shadow lurking near my building, a henchman sent to intimidate. Heart pounding, I confronted him. My voice was steady, eyes fierce. He faltered, unprepared for the fire he saw burning in me, and fled into the darkness. Word spread. The girl who ran now stood her ground. Hope blossomed like spring after a long winter. But the darkness never retreats quietly. Returning home late one night, I found my door ajar, lock shattered. Inside, chaos. My belongings lay scattered, memories torn apart. The photo album I treasured, filled with faces of a happier past, was ripped and stained. Then my eyes met, the cruel message smeared on the wall in thick dripping red. "Time is running out, Gemma." A shiver raced down my spine, but fear no longer ruled me. Amidst the wreckage, a fierce resolve ignited. This was a war for my soul, and I was ready to fight until my last breath. When the night seems endless and the shadows close in, will you let them consume you? Or will you rise blazing, unbreakable? What will you sacrifice when everything you love is on the line? If you've ever stared into the abyss and chosen to fight, comment 1 and stand with me. Like, share, because from the deepest wounds the fiercest warriors emerge. The courtroom was a battlefield of silence and tension. Every eye bore down on the man who once haunted my nights, stole my peace, and tried to bury me in fear. His empire of lies was crumbling piece by piece, exposed by the truth we fought so hard to uncover. But just when everyone thought the story had reached its climax, the air shifted. A witness rose, someone I had trusted, whose betrayal cut deeper than any wound. Their words spilled a venomous secret that shattered the man's facade. and rocked the room into stunned silence. The puppet master was unmasked not only as a villain but as a coward hiding behind betrayal and manipulation. His expression twisted from arrogance to desperation, then finally to utter defeat. The chains of power he had so cruelly wielded slipped from his grasp. When the gavel struck, my chest heaved with a flood of relief and triumph. Justice wasn't just served, it was personalized, a reckoning for every tear I'd cried, every silent scream swallowed in the dark. Stepping into the sunlight, the warmth kissed my scars, reminding me that pain was no longer a prison but a crown. The girl who once cowered in shadows had risen stronger, wiser, unstoppable. But the sweetest victory wasn't just punishment. It was reclaiming my soul, choosing forgiveness over bitterness, and turning wounds into wisdom. I whispered to the wind, "Revenge is sweet, but freedom is sweeter." To those watching, know this: your darkest nights forge the brightest flames. No matter how deep your scars, your story is yours to write. Will you be the victim or the victor? Now, I ask you, if you were standing here, having walked my path, what would your next step be? If this journey stirred something inside you, comment 5 to stand with me. Like, share, and subscribe, because our voices together light the way through the darkest nights. Thank you for sharing this journey. The fight may be over, but the fire we carry will burn forever.